ask, where are black people? How come they're not protesting in the streets? How come they're not leading mass demonstrations at this time? Well, the question is simple. Black people are tired. We are worn out. Black people have fought every cause, fought for everyone, everything, and everybody. Especially during the civil rights movement, a time that America wants to forget and pretend that it never happened. That's why the revisionists of history are trying to eliminate anything pertaining to slavery, the violent, racist, bigoted demonstrations throughout the South, from Birmingham, Alabama, to so many other places that occurred. Well, it's a fact. They did happen. Many times I've told people to watch Eyes on the Prize. It chronicles the entire civil rights movement from beginning, middle, and the end. And civil rights are rights that were supposed to be guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States for its citizens. America has turned back the clock. Well, let me remind you what it was like back then. Alabama is the city that will always be remembered as the climatic battleground of the civil rights movement. The video you're going to see is courtesy from Voice of America. It's not that long, but it is factual and it is historical. Let's take a look at it.
Martin Luther King Jr. came to Birmingham, Alabama in 1963 on a mission to a place he called the most segregated city in the United States.
To dramatize this blatant injustice and to demand that the federal government not put a cent in this city unless it decides to face the realities of desegregation.
In the nonviolent demonstrations that followed, King and hundreds of protesters were arrested. They were pressing the city to eliminate laws that sought to keep blacks and whites separated in schools, restaurants, and many other public places. Historian Robert Corley says King and the local civil rights leaders needed this strategy to succeed.
There had been no movement whatsoever in the city toward any form of desegregation of any of its institutions. And so King was saying, if we can win in Birmingham, if we can come to Birmingham and prevail, then we can win anywhere.
King and his followers were met with fierce resistance from the police. Public Safety Commissioner Eugene Bull Connor, backed by the majority of white residents, was determined to stop the demonstrations. Without enough volunteers to continue the protests, King and other leaders enlisted hundreds of young school children to keep the marches going and fill up the jails. The young African-American student protesters would gather here on the steps of the 16th Street Baptist Church and hear inspirational speeches from civil rights leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They would then file from the church and walk across the street to a park where they were determined to demonstrate peacefully for equal rights.
I was arrested after we got about a block away from the church in this area.
Janice Kelsey was 16 years old when she and her schoolmates were jailed.
My mind was made up. I was going to participate. I was going to go to jail. I wanted to get my freedom.
Then on the second day of the student demonstrations, things turned violent. Police turned high-pressure fire hoses on the young people and set attack dogs on them. Birmingham civil rights leader Reverend Calvin Woods was there.
There had been some dog biting, some beating, some killing. Many people were beaten and spit on and put in jail, lost jobs. But those were minor things compared to what we felt we had to do.
The brutal crackdown was widely televised, and images of the event were seen around the world. Robert Corley says this incident galvanized new support for the civil rights movement.
It was really that children's crusade that really turned the tide, because it did serve the goal of filling up the jails and forcing the white community to come to the table with King and negotiate some sort of settlement.
Eventually, King and Birmingham city leaders reached an agreement. Within months, the local segregation laws were abolished. Reverend Wood says King's determination to keep the movement going made all the difference.
We would not have accomplished what we did if it had not been for the support and leadership that Dr. King brought.
The Birmingham campaign was a climactic battle of the civil rights movement. For many, it stands as an iconic symbol of the sacrifices made by King and thousands of African Americans. Chris Simpkins, VOA News, Birmingham, Alabama.
That's the answer to your question. What'll end up happening, the same thing that happened then will happen now. The goal and the aim is to get black people out into the streets. That's what it is. That's the goal. That's the aim. That's the objective. It started with one group, but in reality, America wants to erase war from within. Let me give you a quick history lesson. The city of Troy was a fortified city because of its walls, so the legend says. The walls were its great defense, and the enemies of the city of Troy did not know how to defeat them. The only way that they could defeat them was to get within the city. How did they do it? They offered the king a pretense of a friendship under the guise that let bygones be bygones. Never trust your enemies. Never. I don't care what they teach you in church. Never trust your enemies. What did they offer the king? A Trojan horse as a gift. So when the huge, larger than life, according to Greek mythology, Trojan horse was given to the king, they opened up its vast, huge doors and they partied and they laughed. Such joviality was happening. And all the time inside the Trojan horse was the entire army of the king. While they laughed and drank and had sexual orgies and they got drunk and passed out, the army was released. And as a result, the city was conquered. The king was captured. They wanted the king to kneel and beg and grovel. The king didn't do it. They killed him. They captured the city. ICE agents, that's much deeper than this, ladies and gentlemen. And black folk, you better heed the lesson from the past. Remember it. Quote, those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. End quote. And the sad thing about it was, the same way the Bull Connor back then released dogs and fire hoses on children, they're going to do it again in this modern age. Children are going to end up become slaughtered. Mothers are going to be killed. And you know what they're going to say? We were only doing our job. We were following orders. That's what the people said regarding Hitler once they captured during the trial at Nuremberg. We were only following orders. We were only doing our job. Really? The extinction of 6 million people, putting them in the gas chambers, starving them, humiliating them, raping their women, systematically plundering their wealth, trying to erase and eradicate their history. And the only thing that they could say, I was doing my job. I was following orders. Tell it to Almighty God on Judgment Day. You know, Prisons are not only filled with people who have done some terrible and horrendous things, but there are a lot of innocent people who were put in prison as well. What did they say regarding the January 6th insurrectionists? They were patriots. They weren't thugs. They weren't hoodlums. They were taking back their country. Suppose black people had done the same thing that they did on January 6th. Do you think they would have called us patriots? Do you think they would have called us heroes? Do you think that we would have been given pardons? You already know what would have happened. When Barack Obama became the first black president, and there will be another one eventually, here in America, and there will be a woman president one day. Obama was rejected simply because of one reason, because he's black. The race war in America continues. The hatred, the vitriol, the bitterness, simply because of the pigmentation of somebody's skin. Then the ignorant voices always say, well, go back to Africa. First of all, we're not going to go to a place where we haven't been. How did we get to this place? Because our ancestors were sold, bargained for, treated like things and cattle and stuff that you buy. Over 10 million of them in this nation alone. We will never forget the past, and we're always going to remember it. I often tell people, and they don't understand, but one day they will. Politics is a nasty, dirty, ugly, godless business. It's about money. It's about power. It's about control. That's what it's about. The militarization of America, California is only the beginning. All the Democratic cities are now going to become under siege. And ladies and gentlemen, when your conscience is beginning to deal with you regarding what you allow to happen, it will be too late. Never surrender. Never quit.